Maxx Crosby breaks his silence on his failed move to Baltimore. Did Baltimore dodge a bullet, or did they fumble a superstar? Free agency dust is finally settled. Who were the winners and losers? Are the Dolphins tanking? Youngsters are scoring history making goals, and a record breaking women's football contract just dropped. Well, hi there, hello, and welcome to the Pitch Grid, the podcast that brings you news, insight, and analysis from both sides of the football world, the NFL, and the world of soccer. We have a packed episode for y'all today. So let's head right on into it and head grid side. And Maxx Crosby, y'all. This was an insane story that broke during the interview that I had with Abe Gordon last week. If you haven't caught that already, check it out. I highly recommend it on all our platforms. And if you haven't listened yet, highly recommend it. And this is a crazy story, y'all. Like, they Baltimore had him in the building, and they said he failed his physical. They were very vague at first, didn't come out with a statement for days about this until the general manager for the Ravens, Eric DaCosta, had a press conference on NFL Network, basically saying that they really just wanted to have both Crosby and Hendrickson, but it wasn't meant to be, and that Crosby just had something come up on his physical that they weren't disclosed to about from the Raiders, and that's why they ultimately just let the trade fall through. However, however, we got some juicy stuff from Maxx Crosby's own podcast, and Crosby himself said that he did not see the GM Eric DaCosta or head coach Jesse Minter during the first 5 hours of his visit to Baltimore when he came to finish the trade, make it final, everything like that. Minter, and when he finally did meet DaCosta and Minter, he said the energy felt off. DaCosta then informed him that they had concerns about his medical, and he really just like, what in the world's going on? Why is all of a sudden this a failed thing going on? And that he was told by a surgeon who called him later to listen to what they were saying. They knew you had your surgery 9 weeks ago, and that he would be back by training camp. Honestly, this makes it even more suspicious, considering the Ravens, literally the day after they let this trade fall through for Maxx Crosby, they signed Trey Hendrickson to a record deal, and Trey Hendrickson was supposed to go to the Colts. Now, of course, Abe Gordon told us on the interview with him that Hendrickson was supposed to make his announcement that day. Now, whether it was going to be with the Ravens or not, we don't know. There are reports that say he was going to sign with the Colts. So, we really don't know exactly what's going on, but it really is quite suspicious considering how secretive the Ravens have been about this whole thing. They really haven't given out a ton of details, just really put all the blame on the Raiders. And honestly, I don't blame Raiders fans for being upset about this. This really feels like the Ravens are just trying to get out of this and really try to lowball the cap by trying to see if they could get Hendrickson through, because reports are that Hendrickson was the acquisition the Ravens were after all along, and Crosby might have just been a backup plan. Which, honestly, why do you even trade for your backup plan then? That's my question. Like, you really want to go after your target first, and if that's not there, then yes, go and trade a couple of first rounders for Maxx Crosby, which was the asking price at the time. And right now, really, that man, there is a lot of egg on the Ravens' face because of this. Because man, you really are trying to lowball the cap. You're going after a backup plan supposedly, and if you really want Hendrickson, go get him. Like, that's not that big a deal. And yes, I know you probably want a first round pick, probably some buyer's remorse in this, as well as maybe some cold feet and all those good cliches. Will the Ravens regret this? I think so, honestly. There has been a lot of talk about will teams regret or want to even trade with the Ravens after this kind of debacle happened. And honestly, I get that argument. However, at the same time, it's the NFL. like a lot of these types of transgressions by teams are easily forgotten rather quickly. So I would not be shocked if really a lot of teams just move on and still trade with them. It might be a little bit it might be a little bit harder, and they might drive up asking prices or whatever if the Ravens are trying to acquire a player. And teams might reversely try to bring down a price that the Ravens want, and yeah, it really. My question is, what the Ravens have not told us exactly what they saw in his physical that gave them remorse about this whole thing, and honestly, that even makes it more suspicious, to be honest. And let's be honest, the Raiders, they're in a great position because they not only do they get all these free agents that they were able to sign, improve their defense, get an anchor for your offensive line to help protect Fernando Mendoza if he should get drafted number one overall, like we all think he will. But you also get one of the top, if not the top, pass rushers back on your defense to help go attack the quarterback. Like, that's a bonus, honestly. And you as the Raiders feel pretty good about it. You get another year of him, and supposedly he has said, and he's come out and said he will stay. So, despite all these reports of him being disgruntled with Tom Brady and the ownership and all that, it does sound like he is going to stay another year. I would not be shocked if somehow they get a structured deal coming up or a new contract or something in that region to try to keep him to stay. If not, he probably hits the trading block next season, and maybe I don't think it's the Cowboys that are going to go after him. I think they feel confident in Rashawn Gary, and others that they have now filled that hole. But right now, it does feel like the Raiders are stuck with Crosby for another year. Now, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but we do know that the NFL just approved a vote on the Raiders' ownership being changed over to the co-chief executive officer of Silver Lake, who is one of the holders in the Raiders, and Mark Davis is not willing to sell the team. This must be There must be something going on behind the scenes about this ownership group, because clearly Crosby has had some issues with it, if reports are true, and now of course the NFL set to vote on whether or not to have a succession plan for Mark Davis. Should We don't even really know why there's a succession plan being voted on, and really what's going on with Mark Davis. But still, anyways, with the whole Crosby thing, you get 2 first round picks if you're the Raiders, but now that's gone, and yet you still have a pretty good haul overall with Maxx Crosby, and the Ravens keep their 2 first rounders. The Ravens have a lot to work on. They really do. They really gambled this free agency on the defense, let a lot of their star offensive pieces go, especially on the O line, which is really going to hurt. Linderbaum in particular also went to the Raiders. So it feels like the Raiders got a couple of pieces up on a leg up on the Ravens in this whole debacle. And yes, are you happy with Trey Hendrickson if you're a Ravens fan? Probably, but also there are, of course, the injury concerns. Can he be the same pass rusher he was 2 or 3 years ago when he led the league in sacks? And would you want a younger one to build around and say Maxx Crosby? He's not much younger, but he is younger, and one who has more consistently produced and had way fewer injuries than Trey Hendrickson, who is 32 years old, by the way. So that is also a concern. However, we've seen older pass rushers succeed for a couple more years after 32 years old. So it's not out of the realm of possibility, but still, it feels like a big gamble to give 112 million to Trey Hendrickson. And I do see why, if there was somehow a possibility, and I don't think there is, but if there was a possibility that this was the plan of getting Crosby and Hendrickson, that's the best of both worlds, because then you get two top pass rushers in the league on your same team. Now, granted, you don't have first round picks at that point. You aren't able to trade one of the top offensive linemen, probably, and who knows what you're going to get in the later rounds. Granted, the Ravens do have a good record overall of drafting talent. It's a very weird situation, and if I'm Maxx Crosby, I would also feel kind of hurt and rather motivated actually to ball out this season, because after all these questions, is he okay? Is this physical going to happen? And if he's correct, his surgeon is correct, he will be back by training camp. He is going to be there for the season. So we are going to definitely see Maxx Crosby on an NFL field come week 1. How good is he going to be? Of course, it was a major injury, but you know, I with the stuff we've seen, it sounds like he and his surgeon are very fully confident that he's going to be healthy and raring to go, if not even better than before. It is very reminiscent to me of the Patrick Mahomes situation, where Mahomes got injured. Of course, I believe Mahomes was after Crosby's injury, but still, you kind of get the same vibes. Yeah, people aren't as questioning Crosby as much as they are questioning Mahomes, which, in my opinion, is kind of a weird question, because you hear all this talk about whether he's going to be ready or not, and yet, Mahomes has shown that he can and will train as hard as possible to be back in the best shape he can possibly be after an injury. We've seen that multiple times after a turf toe, after a knee cap in the side of his leg that kept him out for 3 games. We saw, with the twisted ankle that he had in that incredible playoff run that led to a Super Bowl title for the Chiefs as well. And to I'm not ready to count out Maxx Crosby. You can't count out Maxx Crosby. He is an incredible talent, one of the best pass rushers, if not the best, behind Myles Garrett in the NFL, and I think counting him out is a huge mistake. And honestly, I could totally see that this is Baltimore truly fumbling a superstar, trying to get a piece that they think is more valuable, but in the process they lose not only a superstar player, they lose a lot of trust from different teams. They lose trust from their own players. Like, this whole situation, if you think about it, now if you're a player, do you want to go to the Ravens unless you feel like you are fully healthy? Do you, as a Ravens player, if you're injured, or is Baltimore just incredibly picky, or are they? What is going on behind the scenes in player development, player evaluation? There has to be a lot going on behind the scenes that we just do not know about. And honestly, considering how Baltimore's free agency has gone so far, I would be concerned. I really, we're gonna get to this later, but I could see, unless they address a couple of areas and get someone besides King Henry to run the ball for them, this could be a weird year for the Baltimore Ravens. And I hate to say it, because Lamar Jackson's an incredible player, but the Ravens last year looked different, and they were very fortunate to get down to week 17, get that week 18, get that final playoff spot in their hands, and then lose on a missed field goal, which, isn't the fault of Lamar, is not the fault of Derrick Henry. But still, this Ravens franchise feels like they are a year or two away, especially on defense, from having their Super Bowl window closing. And the Raiders feel like they are starting to try to pry that open a little bit. I don't think they're going to go from zero to hero, the Raiders, but they are definitely using some building blocks. And if they can somehow get an extension, I feel like if Crosby's performance is good this year, they are definitely going to have to sign him to an extension, or else he will probably walk. It feels very much like it was with the Chris Jones situation in Kansas City, where Chris Jones wanted out for a bit. He was having all these tense negotiations with the Chiefs. That one year, he sat out the Detroit Lions game that they lost, but then he came back and they eventually worked out a deal. This feels very similar. I would not be shocked if Crosby somehow gets a massive contract next offseason, probably, if he performs well off of this surgery. So yeah, it's a very difficult situation. Lots of moving pieces. The Raiders do come out, I think, the winners of this in the end, just because if Crosby is up to par and up to expectations, which I think he will be because he's Maxx Crosby, then you have to say the Raiders come out of the winner because they get a pass rusher in their prime to help boost their defense behind all the great free agent signings they had, like Quay Walker and such, to help boost that defense. Now, the offense is going to definitely take some work to rebuild, and I'm sure the Raiders are going to try and build that up in the draft. But until they rebuild that O-line, which to me, besides Linderbaum, is going to take some work to rebuild, then they are not going to fully compete for playoff contention yet. So we also had some other news this past week. We had a couple of trades happen. Jaylen Waddle was sent to Denver, and Bo Nix finally gets a wide receiver one. Now, the Broncos had to give up a first rounder to get Jaylen Waddle, and the Dolphins trade away their best remaining receiver in the organization to a Denver team that needed a wide receiver to help take the top off of defenses. And we saw last year that yes, Courtland Sutton can ball out. He truly is still pretty good still. But at the same time, Waddle is that receiver that can go up the field quickly and give Bo Nix a downfield threat to throw deep to with that cannon of an arm he has. Now, I do think this is a win for both teams. Like I said, Denver just got a wide receiver to help their passing attack. Miami now has 7 top 100 picks, folks. That is a lot of ammunition you can use to not only possibly trade up in the draft if you so choose, but also they could potentially get a lot of new players that they obviously feel like they can build better in the draft than in free agency. Now, of course, they signed Malik Willis to a huge contract. Are paying their they are paying their they are paying their former players more money than the Miami Marlins in the last 2 years, which is insane to think about, honestly. But this Dolphins team is fascinating. I kind of see the vision a little bit. I can see Eric Sullivan trying to destroy the team that was, because clearly we all saw that this team under Mike McDaniel was not going where they thought could go, and it did need a reset. Clearly, Sullivan thought they needed a complete nuke to the facility, and they needed to address it through the draft. Now, of course, drafting is such a gamble. You never know how players are going to develop, how healthy they're going to be, the type of mentality they bring to the locker room, yada, yada, yada. This is a Dolphins team, though, that if you can, they need a ton of help. They need help in so many positions. It's eye watering to see how many people have left and what key positions are needed to fill. So they really need to hit this draft. Eric Sullivan is daring himself to hit this draft hard and with great picks. So if they do not hit this draft with good picks and it starts panning out miserably, he is going to get a ton of blame for how he has handled this offseason in particular. And Malik Willis, I'm sure he feels a little lied to, considering he was told, according to multiple reports, that they were going to be a contender this season. And the Dolphins now are clearly showing that was a lie. I really don't know what this is going to mean for the long term future because we are not going to fully know until 2 or 3 years from now, probably, what this whole future for the Dolphins looks like. And we really won't know the results of this trade until then because it's a fourth rounder that also goes to Denver as well. So that's another player potentially, unless Denver uses it to trade up for something. But still, I don't think we're really truly going to know who is going to win this trade entirely until a few years from now. And that's always the case with trades that include draft picks. You had to wait. Everyone thought the Tyreek Hill trade was a win for the Dolphins because they got an absolute haul. That they got Tyreek Hill and the Chiefs, but the Chiefs got an absolute haul of draft picks, and they used it to win that trade in particular because Tyreek had 2 years, I think, of really good play before he kind of fell off there in Miami. So yeah, with trades, it's always we're not gonna know right away, but just looking at the return, it feels like both teams win. Both teams get great picks, and Denver is obviously saying we have the roster to go win it now, and we don't want to change it too much. We want to stay with this roster. This roster we think was only a Bo Nix ankle away from a Super Bowl, so we're going to give it another go with it. Now, granted, you lost John Franklin Myers to Tennessee. That's going to be very interesting, in my opinion, to see how that impacts the defense because he was one of their best pass rushers. But still, this feels like a very even trade, and it really depends. Does Denver go to a Super Bowl in a couple of years? If Denver goes to a Super Bowl and wins one with Jaylen Waddle, then they absolutely got what they needed, and exactly the kind of return they wanted out of this trade. Someone who could take them over the top to win a Super Bowl. Another huge trade, of course, that happened this offseason that we didn't get to quite get into was the Kyler Murray trade. Well, it wasn't a trade, but Kyler Murray signed with the Vikings. And this is a good move, I think, for Kyler in terms of getting a coach, a system that is very quarterback friendly, one that can help, especially veteran quarterbacks. We saw what Darnold and Cousins did under Kevin O'Connell, J.J. McCarthy. As much as people like to rag on him, if you develop him, he showed flashes. That's the thing. He showed flashes. At the same time, a lot of his play last year was indeed poor. So you get Kyler, and he gets incredibly upgraded weapons. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, T.J. Hawkinson. They get Aaron Jones still because they restructured that deal, which I think was incredibly important for the Vikings. Now they have lost a couple of pieces on that offensive line. That is going to be huge for the Vikings if they can address the offensive line, because that is what Kyler didn't have in Arizona, was a stable offensive line and a stable offensive system. If Kyler's able to adapt, as most veterans have in the Kevin O'Connell system, my question is this the end of Kyler Murray? And number two, is Kevin O'Connell done in Minnesota? Unfortunately, I would have to say yes to both, probably. Considering the reputation that Kevin O'Connell has for mentoring quarterbacks, especially the vets, and getting them to succeed in his system, is enormous, and he's considered one of the top coaches in this league. However, his success on the field has been quite varied. Not a ton of playoff success or playoff entrances, even. And when they have gone, they've been smacked around badly. So, this is definitely a year where you have to prove it if you are Kevin O'Connell. And obviously, this is something that he wanted. Get a Kyler Murray who's a more mobile quarterback who can run around in the pocket, who can create plays on his own with his feet and with his arm, because he does have an arm. It's just he's not been able to show it in Arizona. And now, if he focuses, if he's able to commit to this role, Kyler Murray has a real chance to redeem his career. And I last year came out and was very vocal in saying that he could turn this around. And I thought that he could turn around Arizona, make them a playoff team. I was obviously wrong. However, this is a Minnesota team that has talent that you cannot deny. This is a Minnesota team that is a few pieces away, in my opinion, from being a strong playoff contender in an NFC that is kind of wide open right now. You really think about it, there's not a ton of like top weight contenders. There's a lot of teams that are right below that are kind of just struggling to make a name for themselves. And if Minnesota gets those pieces, they can be one of those teams. Now the question is, can they do that? And I don't have an answer for that yet. But the baffling part is then you just go sign Carson Wentz. Now, granted, this is a three quarterback room, and obviously this is kind of an insurance plan, I'm guessing, in case Kyler gets hurt. And obviously, they don't want a last year where they had to go to Maxx Crosby to be their quarterback. And so they're kind of backing up the insurance policy with a collateral plan in Carson Wentz, who under O'Connell had some decent games. He wasn't always great, but he was decent enough in some of them to get a win. I'm thinking particularly the game in London against the Browns. This is this is going to be such an interesting situation in Minnesota. I do think Kyler's probably going to be the starter day one, unless something happens and JJ just somehow just shows out and balls out. And I hope he does, because Nine has gotten a ton of criticism, and I always like the underdog story. We all like underdog stories, I think, but Nine feels like he's got a lot of unfair treatment for one season, and it takes time for some quarterbacks to develop. And not all of them are going to be Patrick Mahomes, not all of them are going to be Josh Allen, not all of them are going to be Lamar Jackson. We need to be patient. I would like to think the Vikings could be patient with J.J. McCarthy. Give him a year to sit behind Kyler Murray and Carson Wentz, learn and develop, and maybe potentially in the future he can start and be a good starter in the NFL. Because again, like I said, he showed flashes, but that is to be foreseen for now. Just a very fascinating quarterback situation among several, honestly, in this league that are interesting to see how they will develop. Another interesting trade was Andy Dalton going to the Eagles for a seventh round pick, and I liked this trade. Uh, in general, this feels like Andy's last stop. The Red Rifle, I think, has finally found its last place of rest. If he doesn't work out here as a backup for Philly and Jalen Hurts, his career's over. Unfortunately, because this guy had some great years in Cincinnati, was an MVP candidate in 2015. It's just unfortunate to see the path of Andy Dalton's career since he left Cincinnati and how up and down it's been, and not really the career that we thought it could be in 2015. Another trade was Justin Fields going to the Chiefs for a sixth. This is a really good trade. I'm not in the camp that Fields is going to start week one. I do think Mahomes is going to start week one for the Chiefs. I do think that Mahomes will be ready. It might take him a couple of games to get back to full Mahomes speed, but I do think Mahomes will be ready to go. And I honestly think Fields is in a perfect situation to be a great backup. It's one of the younger backups the Chiefs have had in quite some time. And with Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy coaching him up, this is going to be good. Eric Bieniemy loves to have some fancy play calls. We're going to get back to a very intricate offense, I think, in Kansas City. One that is not just throwing the check down every few plays. I really do think that Eric Bieniemy is going to bring a lot of flash back to this Chiefs offense and show everyone again why this Chiefs offense and Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and company are legit stars. And Justin Fields, I think, is going to get used also as a Taysom Hill type player. And this is a guy that is mobile. He can run the read option. He can go into red zone packages as a wildcat, perhaps, and be. And I'm thinking of like the snow globe play, for example, the Chiefs ran against the Raiders a few years ago, where they had Mahomes and the backup and a couple others in the backfield, and it was really fun. I just think that's going to happen again eventually. This is an offense of genius in Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy, in my opinion, who can get the best out of players. And I think Fields is in the right spot to go develop. And if he can't work out in Kansas City, I don't think he works out anywhere, and I don't think that is a shock to anyone. So quickly, let's go over some free agent winners, losers. To me, we had some clear winners in the Steelers, the Titans, the Raiders, and the Rams and Chiefs and Commanders. These are the clear top tier winners, in my opinion. Now, I think the Steelers, they went out and got a ton of good talent to help strengthen their defense, strengthen their offense. They got Michael Pittman Jr. on the offense. They went and got some help for whoever's going to be the quarterback there in Pittsburgh. We don't know. Kyler Murray was rumored to go there. Now you have DK Metcalf, Calvin Austin, and Michael Pittman Jr. That's a solid wide receiver room that last year felt very bleak outside of DK Metcalf. And now DK Metcalf has someone to help take off the top of the offense, help clear out some room in the middle so that he can have more opportunities to create plays and be dynamic. So that's huge for the Steelers, and they have really gone out and hit some of their moves. Raiders, obviously, we talked about earlier. The Titans went out and spent their money quite wisely, I think, going and getting some help on defense, getting Big Jeff Simmons, some help on the pass rush with John Franklin Myers, like we mentioned earlier. And the Commanders also, they got a new running back in Rachaad White, helping strengthen that running game behind Jane Daniels and making it not just, Bill behind him and a couple other Chris Rodriguez, who's a solid running back, but not anything dynamic. The Chiefs, a lot of people are saying they lost because of losing their corners. In my opinion, you are going to, if you are going to say that, you are underrating Noel Williams at your own peril. Noel Williams allowed a 43.5 QBR for last season when he played, and that was on the outside. Trent McDuffie, incredible a player as he is more of a slot corner, and he is now wanting to play on the outside, and that is where he's been beat multiple times when he was on the Chiefs. He's a great tackler. He just cannot cover the outside as well as he can in the slot, and that's where he had a ton of his success in Kansas City. If you're the Rams, I would strongly encourage you to play Watson on the outside, play McDuffie on the inside in the slot, because then you get the best out of both of those corners. Because Watson is a great corner on the outside. Rams really saw that these two corners were some of the best they could get. They obviously were able to lure them in with incredible amounts of money. Is McDuffie worth $30.5 million after being hurt a lot of last season, going on IR? I don't know. He's still good. I think he's just better in the slot, and I think the Rams would be prudent to put him there. If not, I think they're going to see that they might not have replaced they might not have addressed their need at outside cornerback like they thought. Still though, this is a Rams team that they have to win this year. If they don't, it is a failure, and this team will be blown to high heaven because then you have a ton of contracts on your roster. Matthew Stafford's going to be gone. Who are they going to draft a quarterback? Who knows? Next year's quarterback class is going to be deep. So this is going to be a very fascinating quarterback. This is going to be a very fascinating team come next year should they not win a Super Bowl. And this is a team that can win it. They have the talent to on both sides of the ball. Now they just need to go get it done. Tutu Atwell is a huge loss for the Rams, in my opinion. He brings a ton of dynamism to that and kind of the Rashid Shaheed version for the Rams. He could go deep and provide Matthew Stafford a deep threat consistently, besides just Puka and Devontae Adams, and was the younger version of those receivers. But now he's gone to Miami. Otherwise, they had some solid free agent pickups. The Texans, Cardinals, Giants, and Panthers also were some winners in my eyes. All made some very solid moves, helped improve their rosters, and looked a lot better. Some losers, really quick. We talked about the Ravens. I really think they need to improve several areas, including offensive line, if they are going to be able to succeed this next season. We talked about the Dolphins. Lions, Packers, Jaguars, and Eagles also felt like some teams that really kind of lost a lot of talent and really didn't do much. Lions lost some key players like Alex Anzalone and several others. I think Anzalone was a sneaky good pickup by the Bucks. I I was not that impressed with the Eagles. Yes, getting Rick Woolen is a good move, but otherwise the Eagles have not done a ton to really address the mass exodus they've had, particularly on defense. The Panthers got one of their players, and Panthers really addressed a lot of their needs on that side of the ball, that which was the weakness last year for the Panthers, honestly. Um, the Packers haven't done a ton either. They lost Romeo Dobbs. Obviously, that's one of the receivers that was productive for them last year, but he wasn't quite what they needed. And yeah, it's going to be, I think, a very interesting offseason in Green Bay. They need to address a lot of needs in the draft, and if they can do it solidly enough, I think the Packers could be okay. But I might have been a little I might have been a little too early last year when I predicted the Packers to be last, because this and the Lions team, I don't know, it's going to be a very interesting NFC North this year, because it feels like the Lions, Vikings, and Packers are all kind of in that meh region for sure. Um, the Jaguars, they lost some key pieces on defense that are kind of underrated and not huge names for sure, but yeah, the Jaguars are still a very solid team. They have their coaches there, and I'm sure they're going to address it in a defensive heavy draft. But still, it's going to be very interesting to see how the Jaguars rebound from this free agency. Really quick, I also want to address the Steelers and Browns proposed rule changes, particularly the Browns proposed rule change of allowing teams to trade draft picks 5 years in the future instead of 3. They supposedly want to do this because it would provide teams more roster building flexibility. Kind of ironic coming from the Cleveland Browns, but still, I can see why they would want to. It provides more flexibility and, do you what you want to trade, and maybe getting some picks much later and feeling much more secure. At the same time, it feels weird you want to go 5 years in the future. Why specifically 5 when you really don't know what's going to happen those 5 years down the road, especially in the NFL when things can change in one season. Man, it feels it's a weird proposal. I don't know if it gets passed. It probably doesn't. It feels like a rule change that is sneaking in. We're not going to get a tush push this year, vote this year. We're not going to get anything like huge for the competition committee, and this is kind of the big rule change. I personally am kind of sitting on the fence about it. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is kind of fascinating. Trading 5 years worth of draft picks into the future, like a okay. So let's hypothetical. Someone trades a 2031 draft, a 2031 first. I don't know. To me, that feels so weird. But I can also see it if like you really want to build up your draft stockpile for the future. It just feels incredibly weird. The Steelers' proposal, really quick, was to be able to have contact with 5 free agents in legal tampering, and they kind of experimented with it this free agency. We saw that illegal tampering period, and it seemed to work. It didn't seem there to be a ton of problems, so I could see that one probably getting passed. But I will have to see, of course, when the owners' meetings come up. With that, let's head pitch side and talk some footy. The EFL Championship is down to its last 8 or 9 games to go in the season. No one seems to want to win promotion, folks. No one wants to seem to win it. Ipswich, Coventry, Millwall, all losing or drawing lately. And Ipswich, yes, they did get a win, but it was their free win voucher at Sheffield Wednesday. So I'm not taking that too much into account, considering they lost the previous match week. It's such a weird promotion race. It really is. Because all these teams are pretty good this year. And, Middlesbrough's at times looked like the dominant team in the championship. At other times it looked like Ipswich. Coventry, of course, have been the team throughout the season, consistently dynamic, and for most of it, even though they had a brief slump. Honestly, though, it feels like unless something happens, because we still have some huge head-to-heads coming up, including tomorrow when we record this. It's a Friday, and tomorrow we have Ipswich versus Millwall before the international break. So that could be massive, considering the who if it's a draw and Middlesbrough were to win tomorrow at Blackburn, that would make it a 5 point gap to both of them. I could see this going down to the final couple of weeks. Of course, we're down to the final 8-9 games, so everything's going to be important. Every single game matters now. And if you are dreaming of the Premier League, right now, this race is clearly belonging to Coventry, Middlesbrough, Millwall, and Ipswich. Those are the teams in this promotion race. Hull has fallen off because of some losses lately, including a loss to Millwall, which has them back quite a bit in this promotion race now. They had a huge win over Wrexham recently, but it still feels like they are going to secure probably fifth in the playoffs and make a lot of trouble for whoever is in fourth, because this whole team is not going to go away. And granted, the Millwall game was a bit controversial considering Hull had a goal ruled out for offsides. It really didn't look like it was offsides. It looked like the player was leaning back instead of forward, where you would traditionally call it. It was really tight, but it felt like he was onside, and that would have given Hull the lead a couple of times, but they had those goals disallowed, and it allowed Millwall to just take advantage of some sloppy defending by Hull, which has always, of course, been the problem with Hull. They are on the fine margins all the time, this team, and yeah, it really is kind of it's shaping up to be a four-horse race. I do think Coventry's probably going to pull it out in the end for the title. They are 6 points clear of Middlesbrough and 8 points clear of Ipswich and Millwall. I don't think they are going to be caught unless they have another dramatic slip up again. Now, if they do, that's going to be really interesting, because then you have Borough, Millwall, and Ipswich all really needing to pick up the pace a bit. And Middlesbrough did lose Hayden Hackney for a couple of weeks, so that's going to be huge for them. He is the best player in the championship this season when fit. And yeah, he's so crucial to what Middlesbrough do. Uh, Wrexham, meanwhile, are solidifying themselves in the playoff race. They are 3 points ahead of Derby County, who's the closest. Everyone else is starting to kind of fade out, it feels like. And this playoff race is starting to kind of get down to maybe Hull, Wrexham, Derby, and maybe Birmingham if they can pick up the pace a little bit. But Birmingham's been so inconsistent, it feels like being 8 points out with 8 or 9 games to play, it feels like a very insurmountable task at this point for Birmingham City, unfortunately, who many considered, including me, to be a playoff contender this season, had a lot of expectations for them. The relegation battle is also having a rising tide right now, as we are seeing Oxford United getting a couple of good wins, honestly, beating Preston the other week, and looking a lot better as of late. Matt Bloomfield's done a great job with this Oxford United squad. West Brom got a win the other day against Hull as well, which really didn't help the cause for Hull trying to stay in the automatic promotion race. And West Brom, they've gotten some interesting results lately. They just haven't been able to quite find enough to separate themselves from the rest of the pack. Blackburn has been kind of on a heater lately as well, getting the win over Millwall, like I mentioned. Leicester City, meanwhile, they are starting to look like bona fide relegation fodder. They really are. They blew a game against QPR last week, where they were up 1-0 and lost 3-1. That was huge considering Oxford and West Brom both won. And now it's starting to look rather grim in the Midlands for the Foxes. where they could go down to League One, and we've talked about it, covered it before, but still, it's crazy to think about. Oh, speaking of Wrexham in the playoff races, they have been getting some heat lately, and I want to call out the Daily Mail. Now, yes, the Daily Mail is a rather sleazy publication called the Daily Heil and other crazy names because they are crappy and do like to go get their headlines that are salacious and rather clickbaity. But still, this is kind of a problem in general in England when it comes to the types of Wrexham, Birmingham City, where it called out Wrexham for hosting. So Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds were invited by Sky Sports to go on for a separate broadcast to commentate on the Wrexham Swansea game last week on Friday night. Now, very key part of this, there was a main broadcast where you could not watch Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney talk Wrexham. You could just listen to a regular commentated football match, but instead, this guy that wrote the article decided to go ahead and watch the Ryan Reynolds Rob McElhenney and still slammed it, calling it a politics only propaganda broadcast, which is insane to think about, considering the world we live in right now. Why you're calling it this and saying that it's the only broadcast that they were forced to watch it? No, you were not. You could have watched the main broadcast if you really just wanted to watch Wrexham play. If you really just wanted to watch a clean football match. That Wrexham won, by the way, rather comfortably, 2-0. And honestly, like, this is kind of what's wrong with some parts of football circles. You have Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, who have done incredible things with Wrexham. They've gotten this team from the 6th tier to the 2nd tier. They are in the playoff places, potentially going to the Premier League if things go right for them in the playoffs, should they secure a playoff spot. And yet, right now, because Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney are so likable, are charismatic, are great actors, and for the most part, pretty good people, you know, they are getting a platform to go talk about their team, because this is kind of part of how they've been able to be so successful, how they've been able to get the money they've been able to have to spend on players to get themselves into this position. It's because of TV rights. They've been able to have this platform and been able to get out the word about Wrexham. And here in the States, it's an incredibly popular documentary. A lot of people know them. If they don't know any other soccer club, they might probably know Wrexham because it's that popular and that kind of a cool story that a lot of us Americans love in general, because we love our underdog stories. We love the giant killers, the ones who can, go from the bottom and up to the top. It's very FM coded. If you are a football manager player, respect to you. And this is the kind of stuff us FM players love to play and love to do. We take our clubs from the National League to the Prem into the Champions League and win the Champions League, and then usually we quit our save by that point. But still, it's a great story and it's a great platform to have them on. And calling it a partisan only broadcast is just so wrong because, yes, Sky Sports is crummy. They do awful things. They reschedule matches for TV and make it difficult for the away fans, for the home supporters to be able to go to these matches that are huge and crucial and important games, and reschedule them for weird times and things that are just crazy for the average football fan. But still, there's nothing wrong with getting a good story on TV. This is no different than the Manning cast. You have you cannot tell me any different. It's two guys, yes, it's owners, it's billionaires. But so are Peyton and Eli Manning. These guys are billionaires, but they still, you know, Reynolds and McElhenney got into Wrexham because they watched their games here in the States. Manning's brothers, yes, they played the game themselves, but still, it's two owners that have been involved from the ground up and are rather invested in their community and in the best parts of the club mentality, building up from the club from the community, making sure the community is, you know, taken care of. And And if you are taking care of your community as a club, the club will succeed because the community and the town will support you. And that is kind of what Reynolds and McElhaney are doing. So, no, I'm not going to let you, the Daily Mail, bash a team that is doing well, succeeding the right way, is not, you know, pulling a Leicester City, trying to outspend by fraudulent means or anything like that. And not saying that Leicester doing it fraudulently, but they're overspending where they can't spend. Wrexham is spending how they can within their means, and they're still doing well. And that's what I mean by that. And of course, Leicester, of course, has had their points deductions, but still, you cannot bash a team that is doing well just because it's the trendy thing to do in football. Bash on the success of the now giants potentially in English football. They almost beat Chelsea in the FA Cup. This is a team that if you are able to, Daily Mail, you could capitalize on it. You could, in a good way, you could help promote this club, this town, this community. But no, you choose to bash it. And why? That's rather sad, honestly. Get a life. And yeah, if you can't get a life, I'm sorry, it's kind of pathetic. Please shut down the Daily Mail. I beg. Let's quickly get to the Premier League real quick. The relegation tide is rising. We got draws with West Ham and Manchester City and Liverpool and Spurs. Huge draws in the relegation battle. Huge points that could affect the teams at the end of the season, especially Spurs, who were on a bit of a rut. Probably the best performance Spurs have had in a long time, and yet they performed well enough to get a point. They weren't great either. It was just both Manchester City and Liverpool were not on their A game either. And now, yeah, this makes the relegation battle even more fascinating considering we're all within a point of each other, and no one seems to really truly want to fully take control. But they're still getting these huge results against bigger clubs fighting for bigger things, and yeah, who could have seen a Liverpool draw with Spurs coming? I don't think anyone could. Honestly, it's so weird. Honestly, because Liverpool have had such an up and down season, right? And yet they're still within the top six race. They're still in the hunt for Europe. They're still in the hunt for Champions League, and yet they're still not looking like a top five team, in my opinion. They still don't. They have the quality. They've just been kind of lucky in a Premier League that's kind of been weird and unpredictable this year. Manchester City also lost a ton of ground in the title race with Arsenal. Of course, we're down to the final couple of months, and it's starting to look very much like Arsenal are probably going to win this after they won their game against Everton. Uh, Shout out Max Brosmer. I not Max Brosmer is the Vikings quarterback. Shout out Max Dowman. He scored he broke a Premier League record for the youngest goal scorer at 16 years old and 64 days. Honestly, it's quite impressive. Uh, and kudos to him for getting that goal, making some history. Getting your first goal for the club is always incredible, and that's the kind of stuff we love to see. The European race, of course, is still heating up. Brentford is still within 3 points after Chelsea lost to Newcastle, but they couldn't take full advantage of it after losing to Wolves. And then you get Man United securing third place with Villa, with a win over Villa to help give some distance between them and Aston Villa in a huge game that would have really cemented third place for either team, but now it's particularly for Manchester United. This is going to be a rather fascinating last month of the Premier League, honestly. It's going to be a lot of tight races, especially in the European race and in the relegation battle. So keep an eye on those as we head into the run-in of the season. Round of 16, we really didn't get a ton of interesting games. Tottenham did give Atletico a scare. They did win the game at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, but did have to bow out because the aggregate was just too overpowering for them to come back from. Uh, Bodo, our underdog story, did lose in incredible fashion, losing after being up 3-0 after the first leg to giving up 5 unanswered goals to lose 5-3 in Lisbon. Uh, it's a sad ending to what has been an incredible run. Uh, this is a run that probably I don't think will be matched for quite a while in terms of how the position that Bodo was in and kind of where they are geographically and their budget and all of that, competing with the top clubs and giving Sporting Lisbon a scare after the first leg. Sporting Lisbon, though, just showed their quality, honestly. And a lot of these teams did, like Barcelona, absolutely pounding Newcastle at the Camp Nou. And yeah, overall we had a lot of the favorites winning. Chelsea got embarrassed as well. And the quarterfinals are set now, and yeah, a lot of the chalk has risen to the top as we would expect in the Champions League. MLS, we did see Atlanta United get their first win of the season. Shout out our interview with Abe Gordon once again. We recorded that just the day before, and Abe tweeted us after saying he wanted to re-record because they were actually playing well, and they did. Latte lost, as we talked about his struggles. He scored his first goal for the club this campaign. Hopefully that means he can get on track because he is such a talented player. Sporting Kansas City also got their first win of the season as well over the LA Galaxy. And this is, a team that they had got a draw with Columbus, but got shut out unluckily against San Diego, as we talked about with Nate Bukaty on our interview last week. And this team showed that they really do have resilience. Lasseberg, Johan and Johnson came in as a debut, this new signing from Norway, and scored a goal. Dejan Joveljic scored again for Sporting. He is going to absolutely be their talisman once again. He is such a good striker for Sporting. And it looks like this could, if they can keep this going, Sporting might actually kind of defy the odds. They got another signing, and Nate Buchanan mentioned this when we interviewed him. This is a team that could surprise a lot of people and might not be the bottom feeders that we all were expecting, especially with a roster of a lot of unknowns, a lot of homegrown young players. And yet, right now, they were competing their butts off against LA Galaxy, who have a lot of good talent, including Marco Royce. Of course, they don't have Ricky Puig, but still, they are LA Galaxy is a talented team and are trying to bounce back after a horrible year themselves. And National SC and NYCFC are off to flying starts, both having great starts to their campaign with they're still undefeated, I believe. And Miami was held to a goalless draw by Charlotte. Dallas and San Diego had a box office classic, a 3-3 draw. San Diego's just scoring a ton of goals, but they allowed their first 3 goals of the season in this game. It's crazy that these were the first goals they had allowed this season. But it still shows how good this San Diego team is. FC Cincinnati and Columbus are in a bit of a shaky start. Cincinnati got pumped for 6 goals by the England Revolution on Sunday. Uh, this is a FC Cincinnati team that has a ton of talent, but they're near the bottom of the table in the Eastern Conference, as are Columbus, who also got beat this last weekend. So both teams really need to turn it around. They want to live up to the billing of the talented rosters that they have. And it's going to be such a fascinating season. And of course, this is early days. Lots of things can happen at the end of the season, but still, very fascinating results to come through. We had a 14-year-old score in the U.S. Open Cup. That's right. Braden Kalanji scored a beautiful chip shot goal after a penalty was saved for the Kalanji pro team for the UPSL. They did lose eventually to Chattanooga FC 2-1, but still, it was a beautiful goal, a beautiful moment for a 8th grader. Who would have thought you would see an 8th grader scoring a goal in the lower tiers of the U.S. soccer pyramid? But that's kind of where we are in terms of youth development here in the States. The San Diego Wave did sign a record-breaking contract. signing the U.S. women's national team player and Chelsea's Katarina Macario for a 5-year, $8 million deal. This is massive for the women's game. Getting a record deal like this, signing bigger contracts like this, of course, is only going to boost the profile of the women's game and only going to make it bigger. And of course, here in the States, NWSL is growing in popularity with teams like the KC Current and Gotham all, rising up. And KC is those are teams that are in the top of the world pyramid in terms of the women's game. So, growing the game here in the States should try to make sure this is one of the better leagues in the women's game is quite awesome. And congratulations to Macario as well. Lionel Messi scored his 900th career goal, tying Ronaldo as the two to score more than 900 goals. Uh, and it's just a testament to how incredible Lionel Messi is. He is, in my opinion, better than Ronaldo because he has a World Cup, and I think most people would agree with that. Yes, Ronaldo has a ton of talent, but Messi has just shown over the years, over and over and over again, that he is a legend, not just in our present era, but in general in the history of the beautiful game. All right, it's time to get back to the pitchback, where you, the listener, can submit questions, hot takes, anything you throw our way. We will answer it here on the show. We submit those questions on our Twitter, on our Instagram, and Facebook. So if you missed it, you can have another shot next episode. But for now, here are the questions that we did have coming into this episode. At Honolulu Cheese Podcast asked us, who do you think takes the NFC North this year? Honestly, I think it's the Bears. I don't really see the Packers, Vikings, or Lions making too much of a push after the free agencies they've had so far. I cannot make a full judgment yet, though, till after the draft. But right now, if we had to put a gun to my head, probably would say the Bears, just because they had a good free agency. We're rather solid overall, and just they kept a lot of their talent as well. Now, losing Eric Bieniemy is going to be a huge deal, and I want to see if the running game can be as solid as it was last year. But otherwise, the Bears feel like a good roster. Feel like they still have a lot of room to develop and build around Caleb Williams and company. At Pandera Gaming asked us, should your Sanders start for the Browns this upcoming season? Honestly, I don't think you have much choice besides Dylan Gabriel. The Browns are in such a difficult spot unless they draft Ty Simpson. If they draft another quarterback, that's curtains, I think, for maybe Sanders and Gabriel. We really don't know what Todd Monken is really thinking in this offense, but I would not be shocked if he tried both of these quarterbacks, Sanders and Gabriel, in training camp. And I really honestly don't know who would fit better. Sanders did show flashes, but still was pretty bad. Dylan Gabriel was also not that great either. Honestly, it's kind of a coin flip. But I don't know if it's a should. I think it's wait and see kind of what happens in training camp and in the preseason. I think we need that full picture before we can totally say if he should start. At Jay Colenso, a good friend of several of our friends' shows, asked us which team this year goes from worst to first and from first to worst. Honestly, this was a really good question. I had a lot of time to think about. I really couldn't fully grasp an answer on a lot of this, but if I had to answer right now, and I'd love to have the draft to kind of process this better, but right now, if I had to pick, I would probably say from first to worst would probably be the Bucks. They they are an older roster, and considering how besides the Saints made some moves that improved them some. The Falcons made some moves, and they're still a fascinating roster with a new head coach that could do some things for Tua or Penix. And the Panthers improved quite a bit. I think the Panthers are going to be a fascinating team this coming season. The Bucks, they made some moves like Anzalone, like I mentioned earlier, but overall, it's an older roster. I don't know what to think truly about them in total. So I would probably have to say the Bucks are the top candidate right now. Go from first to worst, and from worst to first. Honestly, this was a hard one. It really was. I can't say I really have to think it might be the Titans, honestly. I really do think it could be the Titans. Because while the Texans did overhaul their offensive line, they still have some holes on offense they probably need to figure out. Um, the Jaguars, like I said, they lost some key pieces on defense. It's going to be interesting how they address those needs. And they also need to address a couple things on offense, probably, including replacing Asian there in the running back room. The Colts, we don't know what Danny Dimes is going to look like yet. They signed him to a big extension, but they lost a lot of pieces, including Michael Pittman. The wide receiver room looks particularly thin there in Indy, and they lost some pieces on defense. So it's gonna be fascinating. But the Titans did spend well enough that I think they could go from worst to first because they have a good quarterback in Cam Ward. They got some pieces to help support him, and yeah, and they improved the defense as well. So honestly, if I had to have an answer right now, it would be the Titans to go from worst to first. Answer the call. Go check them out. A fantastic show as well. Are the Dolphins the new Cleveland Browns? I don't think we're quite there yet. I think overall the the Dolphins are still they have a ways to go before that. They need to have a long list of quarterbacks on a T-shirt and a lot more misery before we could call them that, honestly. But good question. Um, and at Three Guys Six Balls podcast also asked if you were Devon Achan, would you request a trade? Honestly, no. If I'm Achan, I stay another year. I ball out. I show I'm an incredible running back. This is my last year of my rookie contract, and if I ball out, I improve my stock for free agency, and my body of work suggests that I can do that. Now, granted, he's on a bad team, but why not improve your stock at least in free agency? Try to get a big payday there, you know. And now that they're probably not going to trade him, the Dolphins probably aren't going to get anything for him, and they know that he's their big star right now, besides maybe Malik Willis on offense. So honestly, why not improve your stock and go ball out in free agency, get a huge fat paycheck? And for that is it for this episode of the Pitch Grid. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss an upload. Also, keep an eye out for posts. We always post updates for episodes and such like that. Listening on Spotify or Apple, a rating or follow goes a long way and tells people and the algorithm that you enjoy the show. We will be back soon with more chaos, commentary, and coverage from the world of soccer and NFL. But until next time, y'all, stay sharp.